Hello, welcome back to the studio. As you see, well, my easel's blank. That's right, it's been so hot here that my paintings have been drying before I can even get close to completing them. So I thought, let's do something a little different. I've got a special guest in the studio. We're going to be interviewing him later on. But in the meantime, I want to do two things. I want to make a specialist brush and also to make one of these little things. You see me using both of these, and I know that many of you have been asking me, how do I make them? What should I do? So I think we should go on a little field trip first and see if we can pick up some supplies. So here we are, back at the studio with our car sponge. And make sure it's one of those nice cheap silicone ones. I don't use natural sponges. I think Mother Nature needs those more than I do. And I'm going to use just a nice sharp kitchen knife to slice this into chunks. Don't make them too small. Give yourself a little bit more sponge than you think you need. I'll cut this chunk in two. I think that's about right. But look at the surface though. It's a little bit smooth what I need it for, which is to make some nice interesting marks. I need to give this a little bit of distressing, and for that I'm going to use these. It's a pair of needle nose pliers, sort of things jewellers use, but you find whatever you have laying around the house. I pluck the sponge and remove some nice little holes. It wants to look a little bit like the surface of the moon. Doesn't take very long before you've got some nice irregular patterns and shapes. And don't forget, give a couple of the edges a bit of a plucking too. I like to leave a couple of edges smooth and straight. I find it's sometimes useful when I want to do some edges on paintings. After a couple more minutes, I have my sponge ready to paint. Dip this in some gesso or acrylic and away you go. Let's move on to a special brush. You've seen this brush before. It paints amazing grass details, leaves, in fact anything sort of with a nice random pattern to it. It's an old fan brush, one I've hacked down. Now I've got two candidates here, and the one on the right's lost those little metal half moon shapes. This one's equally bristly, but with the half moon still in place, it doesn't cut as nicely. So let's get going with this one. You need a really nice pair of kitchen scissors, something very strong and nice and sharp. And the first thing I want to do is just to sort of trim away part of the brush. Take your time with this. Don't go hacking at it too quickly, you'll end up sort of ruining it. What I want to try and do is to get the brush down to sort of a nice narrow column of bristles first, about 1/4 of an inch wide, about 6 or 7 mil. And as you see, it takes a few snips to get through those bristles. They're pretty tough. You see, I take a few bristles off at a time. I want to get it down to that nice straight shape with a little bit of width to it. I found if I go much smaller than that or much narrower than that, the bristles don't hold their shape. As I get close to the shape I'm looking for, I'll compare it to the one I've already made. Not far to go now. A little bit more snipping, a little bit more trimming, and we'll start developing that little chamfer. This gives it a distinctive sort of dagger shape. In fact, there are brushes called dagger brushes, and that's where the idea for this bristle brush came from. Almost finished now. Just a few more little snips to refine the shape a little more. But it doesn't matter if it's not perfect. In fact, the more ragged it looks, the better the effect will be when you dip it into some paint. And there, I have a new replacement for the other brush when it wears out. Perfect. So now you know how I got those two special items for my painting. But it's time for our interview, and I'd like to welcome into the studio Barry. Good afternoon. Barry, tell us a little bit about yourself. Well, I started painting a few years ago and I just used some basic brushes, some fans, some filberts, a couple of liner brushes, nothing special, just basic kit. And then what happened? Well, I went to an art club and I met a lovely artist there, and she said that she bought these new brushes and she was painting better than ever. And I looked at her paintings and they were wonderful. And she said if I got some, I'd paint better too. So I bought some, and for a while I thought I was a better artist. So you thought a new brush would make all the difference, did you? Well, everything was all right to start with, and then after a while I thought, maybe if I had better brushes, I'd be an even better artist. So I started buying more brushes. I used to hang around art shops, waiting for the latest range to arrive. Eventually I progressed to online catalogues. I bought more and more brushes in the hope that they were all going to make me a better artist. So you want to see the collection, do you? I keep them in the closet here. I'll get them out so you can have a look at them. Yeah, so this is just sort of part of the collection, really. Look at everything. Floral brushes, wildlife, some specialist brushes, some extra brushes, some maybe nearly new brushes, some slightly worn brushes, brushes which I like, I don't know what to do with, so I'll have to keep them. And I've got some more brushes in the drawers underneath as well. So yeah, I've got a lot of brushes. So, which brushes are my favourites? Oh, I quite like the ones I started with, really. I think these are still my favourites. So, that concludes the interview this week. And I think a reminder to us all that it isn't always the brush that makes the difference. The real magic is you and me, the artist holding the brush. Yes, we all like something new and fresh to play with, but it can be a distraction. It can take our eye off what is really important, which is to master the basics first. If you've enjoyed this week's little video, then don't forget, leave a like and a subscribe down below. It doesn't cost anything, and you get to see all of the new videos as I release them. And when you subscribe, don't forget, ring the little bell. That means when I release a video, you are the first person to know about it. Now, let me see if I can get back to finishing the painting that I started. Happy painting, people.